The chai is phenomenal.
Okay.
It's so karak. It's fantastic. It's really interesting being from a Pakistani background because there are things that nice white middle class girls can do that if nice Pakistani girls do them, they're considered bisharam.
By who though?
What I was saying was, I'm going to function within this system, but I'm going to live my life on my own terms. And I had been empowered by my knowledge of Islam. I've got 3 sisters, and it was like, you know, inke ghar shaadi nahi karna kind of thing. And I think somebody said, inki betiyaan bhag jati hain.
Wow. So you got...
I don't want to talk about it as a disrespectful thing to being Pakistani. I love being of Pakistani heritage. I love it. So is this part of the process? You have to make chai at home before you bring it here?
Show's called Egg Chai.
Yeah.
We didn't give you one. It'll be a bit out of order.
I go anywhere for chai. Has it got elaichi in it? That's what I want to know. Garak. Do you know when I was a kid, my dad used to really love garak chai. And that was like the morning routine. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Right, welcome to Ek Up Chai Crossing Cultures. This is a vodcast presented to you by the Independent Urdu. If you don't know about the Independent Urdu, please do check them out on YouTube, X, TikTok, Instagram, all of that amazing stuff. And yeah, this is Ek Up Chai Crossing Cultures. My name is Shaikh. This is Ali. And what we've been doing over the last couple of weeks is sitting down with amazing figures from the South Asian community and talking to them about their careers, their progression, their journey, and what type of things they've been able to kind of learn within their journey so far. ये है एक कप चाय क्रॉसिंग कल्चर्स, एक पॉडकास्ट presented by the Independent Urdu, और हम बात करते हैं लोगों से जो पाकिस्तान से British South Asian diaspora से हैं. Today, joining us on the show is a very special, amazingly talented journalist and writer. Both. You may have seen a book that she's written called The Vengeance, or you may have seen another book that she's written called The Khan. I saw it quite a lot when I was walking down the high street, and I used to see it pop up in Waterstones, and I used to always be like captivated by it because we never see books reflected that kind of talk about our community.
Yeah.
Saima Mir is on the show. Thank you for joining us on
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited
You're welcome.
to chat to you guys.
How is the chai?
The chai is phenomenal.
Okay.
It's so karak. It's fantastic.
You're not just saying that?
No, I wouldn't.
Okay.
I don't mess around when it comes to chai.
Okay, that's good. So first and foremost, I just want to start, like, how did you get into writing? Because it's quite a rare thing for South Asian, Muslim, female to kind of work in that kind of field.
So I'm a journalist by profession, and I became a journalist around 20 years ago.
Okay.
And I've written about myself for The Guardian. So I became a journalist quite late, actually. I was 27. And by that time, I'd been married and divorced twice. And from the kind of community that I come from, that was a really big deal, right? You know, nice girls from nice backgrounds, you did not leave a marriage. Maybe if he was abusive, like he hit you, but my relationships were different. It was more emotional situations. And by the time I was 27, I'd lost my reputation almost. And I didn't care anymore. And I'd always wanted to be a writer. And I'd always wanted to be a journalist. Because my nana was a journalist in Iran.
Okay.
So I'm of Pakistani heritage, and he was one of these people who had gone from Pakistan to Iran. So it was like this really romantic story of my nana. He died quite young. And so I really wanted to write. And I pestered. This was pre-internet. So I pestered the local features editor. And I was like, I really want to I really want to be a journalist. How do I do it?
This was features editor for what? Like
the
what, a
local
newspaper?
paper.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like most people who are of Pakistani background, I didn't have a network. You know, our parents, when they left their homeland, they left all that network behind. So I didn't know the path. I didn't know how do I get there. But I was so bolshi by then. Like I was quite besharam.
What's bolshi mean?
Bolshi, besharam.
Oh, is that Urdu word?
Bolshi is English and besharam is
Besharam is
obviously
Urdu.
a Desi word. Yeah.
I gotta say, anytime I learn a new word, I'm like, I've never heard bolshi in my life. But besharam, I've heard that many times.
Totally, you've been called it. So right. Totally.
Loads of times.
Besharam, you know, all those.
I don't know about that one. That's a step
That's
too far.
a step too far,
Yeah.
right? So I didn't care, and I just wanted to write. And I think my parents had kind of decided, chalo, kya hoga ab iska? Like, isse kaun shaadi karega? And not that they wanted that to be the case. And so I pestered this features editor at my local paper, and I wrote some stuff for them, and a job came up. And I applied for it. He called me up, actually. He said, you know, there's this job. Do you want to apply? And so I did. And I kind of was winging this interview. I didn't have a clue what I was saying.
Everyone does that in the beginning. You
Yeah.
don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
You're just
but I
making
wanted
stuff
it.
up.
You know, when you really want it, you have nothing to lose. And they said, great, do a 2-day work experience thing at the paper. And I stepped into the newsroom and I knew I'd arrived. I just knew this was where I was meant to be. You know, there's something about where the universe kind of comes together.
Absolutely.
And it's like, you just know.
And that environment as well. So like when you walk into an environment, you know kind of whether it's for you or whether it's not for you.
Yeah.
You like it, you have a connection to it or not, right?
Yeah.
I think that's important, yeah.
Totally. And I lived in Bradford, which is where I grew up. And Bradford has a really big Pakistani community. But the interesting thing about that newsroom was there was no one in there who was not white. And so I went into this newsroom. I could speak Urdu fluently. I could speak some like tutti-putti Punjabi. I could understand Punjabi. And I could speak Hindi. And I had access to this like great bank of stories from these people who were not being connected with. And so that's how I started out.
Okay.
And so I landed a job there. They paid for my traineeship, and they trained me up.
And then you started working at the BBC?
Yeah. So then after kind of 2 years, after I was professionally qualified, what I did was I really wanted to write for 3 things, 3 people. My local paper, because my dada taught me to read the headlines. And I wanted to write for The Guardian because when I was an A-level student, that's what everybody was reading in my school.
Yeah.
We were a liberal lefty school. And then the BBC, because who would not want to work for the BBC when you're starting out? And so what I did was I sent The Guardian my CV, but at the bottom of it, I wrote awards and I dated it in the future. And I put like Pulitzer Prize 2028.
You hadn't won or been nominated or anything?
No, but
You were just you were manifesting.
Yeah, okay. I was like, I'm this great. Because by then, I really had nothing to lose. Yeah. Like the path I was supposed to be on as a nice British Pakistani woman was I supposed to marry a doctor and then maybe have a job, but actually just have some children and have this nice life. That was not going to happen for me as far as I was concerned. I was like, that's gone. So now I'm free to do exactly what I want. I'm already besharam as far as the world is concerned.
Just go for it.
Just go for it. There's nothing to lose. Be more besharam. Yeah. I mean,
in a respectable way, if that in your career, like.
Well, the thing is, it's really interesting being from a Pakistani background because there are things that nice white middle class girls can do that if nice Pakistani girls do them, they're considered besharam.
By who though?
Well, by our own society, by the own culture that we come from. You know, like आपके बारे में लोग बातें करते हैं.
Yeah.
फिर जो
लोग क्या
कहेंगे ये क्या होगा आपसे शादी कौन करेगा अब आपका क्या होगा, this kind of thing. It's such a massive thing.
Because I read somewhere and I found it really fascinating when I read it about you is that someone, I don't know what it was, like a community or something, but they said, oh, stay away from Saima Mir BBC.
Oh, yeah.
Or something.
Oh, totally.
What? So this was like a Maulvi in a mosque?
This was a Maulvi in a mosque. So when I eventually met my husband, and my husband actually, surprisingly, was from the same background as me. And what happened is that Adnan had lived, his name's Adnan, he'd lived a completely different life to me. Like, I was I was really conventional, right? And actually, I wasn't doing anything that was really bisharam, except for saying, here's my freedom, I want it, I'm going to take it. He was off partying, doing all kinds of things, right?
He was being a guy.
He was having a good time, right? He was living.
Yeah.
He was like free. He wasn't like me. And anyway, and for some reason he decided I was the woman he was in love with and I was the woman he wanted to marry. And so when he went to the masjid to sort out all the nikah forms and everything, the Maulvi Sahib said to him, when he said, who are you going to marry? He said, Saima Mir. And he said, Saima Mir, BBC? Are you sure?
That is hilarious.
And my husband was like, she's a Maulvi in a miniskirt, this woman, right?
Oh, my God.
Yeah, totally. So the thing was that because I was on television, because I was a TV reporter by then, I was
Do you think that was like an element of like him not fully understanding you or fearing you because you had the BBC behind you or something?
It's a cultural thing.
Okay.
It was a real cultural thing. It was a thing of I was scary because I wasn't living the life that a traditional woman was living. I had left 2 men. I'd divorced 2 men, like publicly. It's not like I was having relationships and no one knew about it. Like everybody knew. I had the audacity in the world. I had the audacity to leave 2 pade likhe, whatever.
Who do things by the book. Yeah.
Who do things by the book. Like, ye aurat samajhti kya hai apne aap ko? Ye hai kaun? But what I was saying was, I'm going to function within this system, but I'm going to live my life on my own terms. And I had been empowered by my knowledge of Islam. So they couldn't get me. Like when they'd come at me with like religious stuff, I'd be like, actually, this is what it says. And I'm allowed to do this.
So you kind of gave it back to them in the way that they would give it to you about religious knowledge, which some people do. You was able to kind of tell them, no, this is actually what's really written or said.
Yeah, it's to do with, so I'm about empowering women to live how they choose, how they want, however they want. And that's a big deal, right? Because you're smashing people's ideas and you're disrupting their comfort zones. So I made people uncomfortable. Like if I was living like this and I had this job and I was living on my own in my own house, तो फिर उनकी बेटियां भी करेंगी ना, फिर हमारी बेटियां भी आज़ादी मांगेंगी, तो फिर हम क्या करेंगे? And they don't want to do that. And that's what it was. I was like making everyone uncomfortable.
How were your parents in that stage of where you decided to go the way you wanted to go down? Would you say they were supportive, or did they have a lot of people in their ear and they were listening to what they were hearing? And
so the interesting thing for me was I'm really lucky that my parents were really supportive. They were supportive of me. Like they never said, why did you leave? Or, you need to make a go of it. And I remember saying to my mum, you never asked me. I said, aapne mujhe kabhi pucha nahi कि kya hua? And she said, मैं तुम्हें जानती हूँ, मैं अपनी बेटी को जानती हूँ. I know that you wouldn't do anything. You wouldn't have done anything. And so they were really supportive, but they suffered. My family suffered. Like I've got 3 sisters, and it was like, इनके घर शादी नहीं करना kind of thing. And I think somebody said, "Inki betiyaan bhag jati hain."
Wow. So you got labeled for they're the running away family.
Totally. And I said,
if you marry a girl from there, they'll run away.
Like, don't marry one of those girls because they'll actually demand you treat them with respect.
Oh, wow.
And I remember saying to my sisters, saying to them, "I'm really sorry that this happened." And they were like, "Don't be stupid. Oh my God, can you imagine how we would be living if you hadn't have done what you did?"
Oh, so they thanked you for
doing
it. Yeah,
they were good. Like, we would have been living that really straightforward, boring lifestyle quietly,
I love the disruptors. Like, if they're doing it and they have a pure intention, I love the disruptors. If they're doing it and their intention isn't that pure and it's for like selfish gain, then I'm a bit like, oh, nah, I'm not a fan. But people who change things up allow the next people to come up to do things however they want to do.
Well, it's really, you're right. And I didn't do it intentionally to disrupt. I was just surviving. I was like, this is not right. I cannot live like this. And so I have to find a way to be safe and to be happy. And I just knew inside of me that it wasn't right. Like, I deserved to be treated better. And what happened is that in 2019, I wrote an essay, or it was published, about this, about my experiences. It came out in a book. It's called It's Not About the Burqa.
Really, I got that book sent to me. It's like a collection of essays by different Muslim women.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's really good.
Fantastic collection. Really fantastic women. And the essay appeared in The Guardian. And it appeared in 2019. And I remember this because I had just had a baby. I'd had a third bonus baby. I was in my 40s and I'd had this baby. And I was like... and this essay was published. And I thought it would just fizzle away. I thought it would just, it went quite viral. It got 250,000 hits in the first 2 days.
And the title of this was?
I can't remember. I think it was something like, I'll always be the woman who left 2 husbands.
Oh, okay.
So it was about this. It was the most read article in The Guardian that year. And I got emails from across the world, from men and from women, saying, thank you for writing this. I'm going through this, or my sister's going through this, or we want more people to talk about this.
It's probably such a common thing that so many different people experienced, but you speaking your truth kind of related to them to be able to reach out and share theirs with yours.
Absolutely. And also, I don't want to talk about it as a disrespectful thing to being Pakistani. I love being of Pakistani heritage. I love it. I love our food. I love our chai. I love our kapde. I love the language. I grew up listening to a lot of poetry and, songs and music. But I do think that when there is an issue, we can address it because we can then rise up to another level.
Absolutely.
And I think that connected with people, where they were like, yeah, we're Muslim. Yeah, we're Pakistani. We're trying to function within this system. And you've written about it in a way that's respectful, but also said, yeah, there's an issue. We're creating something else. And actually, we're powerful and we're interesting.
Absolutely.
And we've got some really great stories. Because there were kids sat in there eating karai gosht with and then having a jam roly-poly and custard. Right? That's us.
Sounds like our childhood.
Yeah. The men are important. They're celebrated. The women are not celebrated. So we have issues with this. But what I was thinking was that actually the women I knew around me were not like that. So why not write a crime novel where the protagonist, to get there, you've got to figure it out. It's not like someone said, Abat Jabet, I'll take you. It's not like in Pakistan where my husband and I, when we want to say things that we want to hide from them, we speak in Urdu. Yeah, totally.
Interesting nicknames.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you read that. That was like, yeah.
I want to move on to the Khan and the book, right? How did you come up with this idea about the protagonist being a very strong female lead, and where did that ideation come from?
So when I was a trainee reporter at the local paper, I'd get to cover these great stories, like really interesting crime stories. I went to cover court stories. And my editor, when someone would come into our lobby, so the paper was in this massive glass building. It was an old-fashioned building, and the front of it was glass. And I'd get sent into the lobby to say, someone's there, they've got a story, go find out. And I went down there, and this guy came in, he was absolutely hammered. You could smell him, and he was like, do you know, Bradford is run by these 12 men. And I was like, really, is it? It's fantastic.
It's a pretty good Bradford accent as well.
This is not going to make a story, but this is fantastic. So it stayed in my brain. And then there was a policewoman called Sharon Beshanivsky who was shot in Bradford. And she was shot in a part of Bradford called Maulvi Street, where there's the theatre. And she was the shooting happened in a travel agent's, and it was around the time of Hajj.
Okay.
So when Hajj happens, people would do a lot of money transfer, and they would buy their tickets and take cash in. And so these guys had gone in to rob this travel agent's. And and she'd been shot. And I was on shift that day. I'd gone home and I got a call from the news editor saying, can you come in? So there's been a shooting. I was like, sure. Because when you're young, you don't think twice. When your news editor says there's a story, you're like, okay, I'm going. You know, you turn up
Go
wherever.
straight away,
You just go. There's no fear. You know, and so I turned up. And what happened is that whenever you go to a news story where it's a big national story, all the national media is there, and you get to know them so you can see them. And the Daily Mail journalist was there, and he clocked me, and he knew she is the local reporter, right? And so there was all the shops were closed, but there was one place open, and at the time it was called Café Lahore. And I walked in, and it was young British Pakistanis in their 20s, drinking chai, eating parathe, and eating salan and school dinner puddings. And on the walls, there were like pictures of 70s Bachchan. I mean, I'd never...
Old school Bollywood.
Old school Bollywood, like the angry young man. Like, that's my thing, right? And the guy who stood opposite me, I looked at him, and he was clearly Pakistani, British Pakistani. And I said to him in Urdu, I said, "Aap Urdu mein baat karte hain?" And he said, you know, in tutti putti Urdu, because he was clearly second gen like me. And he said, "I do." And I said to him, "Ye jo mere saath aaya na, ye Daily Mail ka reporter hai. What I want from you is, mujhe uska number chahiye jo yahan वाकया हुआ है, लेकिन मैं नहीं चाहती इसको पता लगे." And the Daily Mail reporter's face fell, and the guy who then became a really good friend of mine gave me the number. He got me the number.
And the Daily Mail reporter could not speak Urdu.
He could not speak. He was a white guy.
So obviously, because you had that advantage, you could build a relationship with somebody
who was also second gen.
Yeah.
And while I was in there, I realised that there's a whole group of us who are not Pakistani and who are not quite white British. We're something in the middle, right? And we're creating something else. And actually, we're powerful and we're interesting.
Absolutely.
And we've got some really great stories. Because there were kids sat in there eating karai gosht with and then having a jam roly-poly and custard, right? That's us.
Sounds like our childhood.
Yeah.
Well, you'd go and eat that at school, but then come home and have some salan.
School dinner puddings.
Yeah, like keema aloo.
Totally, keema aloo roti. And he built a business, this guy, Asghar, his name is, built a business empire on that later on. And so I thought, okay, all these things were mulling around in my head. And I love The Godfather. And I come from a very big Pakistani family, a lot of cousins. And all the women I know are really strong, smart, clever. And I thought, why is everyone saying that Pakistani women are oppressed and need rescuing? I don't know any Pakistani woman who needs rescuing.
Where does that stereotype and that stigma come from? Is it because it's been bombarded in films and a narrative?
I feel like it comes from like some of the traditional stuff that you touched on, that women get married to someone of a certain profession, become a housewife, stay at home, and that's their life for the rest of their life. So I feel like it comes from somewhere.
Totally. It comes from our society, right?
Yeah.
Patriarchy is deeply embedded within our society,
True.
right? The men are important. They're celebrated. The women are not celebrated. So we have issues with this. But what I was thinking was that actually the women I knew around me were not like that. So why not write a crime novel where the protagonist is a woman? And if she's been raised in money, as a lot of people I knew were, and she's been sent to those schools, what happens when she comes back and sees, actually, my father, all right, he's a criminal kingpin, but now I get to understand why he did what he did.
I thought it was fantastic because I read a lot of material from an acting perspective, right, and stories. It's very rare to come across like a female lead that's just running stuff and is Muslim and a girl. And there was a quote that you wrote about like women have to work 4 times harder than a white male.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God, she's like hitting the nail on the head, like the character, wherever that's coming from.
Yeah.
It resonated a lot.
Twice as hard as men and 4 times as hard as white men.
That's it. Yeah. That's
it's true, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. I'll be completely honest. I feel like I've had to work extremely harder than like some of my counterparts who have been able to get more opportunities, like from a career perspective. But it's just
you have to be exceptional to get in the room.
Yeah, it's true.
And a lot of people are coasting on mediocrity. And we don't get to do that because we don't have the network to get us in the room. First of all, you know, to get there, you've got to figure it out. It's not like someone said, you know, Abat Jabet, you know, I'll take you. It's not like in Pakistan where someone's like, main janta hu usko, main aapko le jaunga.
Yeah.
You know, you totally have to find out.
But this is why I'm not mad at people who do have experiences of nepotism, because that's
the world.
That's the world, and that's their circles know people who are either casting directors, writers, documentary producers, and can get them in. If our community start building that now, future generations can then do the same thing and be a product of nepotism.
But then it also goes back to, you touched on it earlier as well, as our parents sacrificed coming from our homeland, coming to somewhere that was completely alien to them, and they've left everything behind and everything's brand new, and we've sort of had to figure out ourselves.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the kids born here, obviously, they've got their parents that have been here their entire life and they've built it up their entire life as well.
Yeah, very good point.
They start at a different level to us, don't they? And we build that. And I think for me, one of the things that's really important is sharing that then. You know, once you get somewhere and you get some knowledge, and saying, okay, let me show everybody else. You don't pull up the ladder.
There was something I read also about you not teaching your children Urdu.
Okay.
And not wanting them to speak the language.
No, it's not that I
Iska
don't.
kya wajah tha?
It's not that I don't want them to speak Urdu. I do.
Okay.
They don't learn. And so I have 3 small boys.
Okay.
And in the midst of raising them to be good men, somehow the language has fallen by the wayside. So because my parents don't live here, they live up north.
Okay.
My husband's parents have passed away. My husband's Urdu is probably akin to what you were saying your Urdu is like. Ali.
His Urdu is amazing.
Go on there.
He's just very shy.
We can touch on it later, but go on.
So my husband, I'll tell you, when I met my husband and I introduced him to my mum said to me, "Isse thodi si Urdu mein baat karo, warna people are going to think he's special needs." Like literally, that's
as in it's that bad?
It's that bad.
Oh, okay.
And my husband's Urdu was really bad.
Oh, okay.
So is that what you think the cause was? Is when you had your first, second, third child, when you two were conversing, was it because you were speaking in English to each other and they haven't picked up on stuff at all?
I think, they didn't pick up on it. We were speaking in English. But also, you know, I speak fluent Urdu. I don't know, what did you grow up?
So I can
listening
speak
to?
Urdu, but my parents always spoke Urdu in the household.
Yeah.
Whether we reply in English or Urdu is up to us,
Yeah.
but we fully understand
And
it.
are your parents first generation? Like, did they come here
Yeah,
or did they?
they came.
So, like, I was born here and so
Yeah,
was my
it's harder.
husband. And we kind of, it's not intentional. My children just don't speak it. And in fact, it's quite sad for me. I've had to make peace with the fact that they don't speak Urdu. But my grandmother said something to me, you know, before she passed away, which I thought was really fascinating. My family's originally is Kashmiri, like 5-6 generations back were Kashmiri. And she said, "Hum log Kashmiri nahi bolte." Right? You know, they spoke Urdu, they speak Punjabi, they spoke all these things. And she said that you lose things. And I think that's part of what happens. It's just, it's unfortunate. But, you know, I keep thinking...
It might be a personal thing that they go on later. Like,
Exactly.
if they don't know it now, maybe when they get older, they might start connecting with it.
Well,
in
the
their own way.
youngest, what's happened now is that my husband and I, when we want to say things that we want to hide from them,
Oh,
we're
you
speaking
speak in
Urdu.
Urdu.
Got
Totally.
Interesting nicknames.
Yeah.
They're
Oh,
gonna-
yeah, you read that. That was like, the beach wala. So we have bada wala, chota wala, beach wala.
Beach wala.
Beach,
Yeah.
the middle one.
Listen
Oh,
to this.
beach me.
Listen to what the nickname is.
So he thinks he's the beach bum wala.
That's the best nickname you could have given.
That's hilarious. Because when you hide things from kids, they want to sometimes figure out what the word is. So
Yeah.
maybe that could be a way of you kind of trying to teach them.
Well, the youngest one has started to pick up on it a lot more.
Okay.
But I think that's because my husband and I speak Urdu a lot more because we have a lot more stuff to hide from the other
There you
two.
go. Yeah.
I don't know.
Have any of them asked to try and learn the language
Yeah,
like
they-
actively?
They ask.
Okay.
Oh, that's
They
nice.
ask and they listen. But they make fun.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, they take the me. They're like, tika. And I get really triggered because that sounds like some racist stuff from my childhood.
Yeah. But they're just it's just joking around.
What does that mean, Mama? Ha ha
They're just
ha.
being
I
like,
mean, they
"Oh,
make fun of my northern accent. The other day I said something like, get in the bath, and they were like, bath? What's that, Mama? It's a bar. You know.
Yeah, that's just accents.
It's really sad because I really love Urdu and I really love Urdu Shairi. And so, yeah, that's like a raw nerve.
With films as well, does that not help? Do they just read subtitles and they don't pick up on? They'll probably pick up on the odd word, etc. But
Urdu films?
even like Bollywood
Hindi,
films,
like Bollywood films,
you can pick up
it's
things.
not like when I was growing up, we watched a lot of Hindi films, but Hindi films are not appropriate now for small children.
This is true.
The stuff that we watch, like an item number comes on, and you're like, close
true.
your eyes.
It's that awkward moment of when you're watching an old film with a parent, and you're like,
You have to look away or like
walk out the room. Like,
I'm trying to teach them to respect women, and then in the middle of this Indian movie, there's this one lady in barely anything, and these men dancing around her, and I'm thinking they're not ready.
yeah.
I'm not ready to answer these questions.
Maybe in a few more years. We basically ask all of our guests that come on the show if there is some advice that you could give to somebody who is, say, the younger version of yourself, but aspiring to be a writer, a journalist, wants to write fiction. What words of encouragement or advice could you give to them?
So there's a couple of things. One thing is your relationships are the most important thing you have. The relationships that you build. These are the things that will serve you. And I don't just mean your personal relationships. I mean your work relationships. Like, don't burn your bridges with anyone. If somebody upsets you and you don't like it, you can separate yourself from them. But you don't have to go like ballistic on them. I find a lot of young journalists kind of don't realize that you can hold your tongue and you can walk away. You know, you don't have to say everything that you feel at every moment that you feel it. So relationships are just key. Diplomacy and relationships, they've really served me well. And build your network along with people who are at the same level as you, as well as networking up. Because those people who you start out with will end up in positions of power, and they will remember you if you've built that relationship. And I see that happening now in my career. As it comes to fruition. And the other thing is, it's kind of a more modern thing, which is in this time of social media, this thing that my mum always used to say. My mum always used to say, "Kisi ko koi cheez tahreer mein nahi dena," which is basically, don't give anyone anything in writing. And then I became a writer.
My grandma used to say that as well. It was a big thing for them. Like, if it's in writing, it's like Kabul.
Yeah.
Like, it's happening.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's not written, then it's like, oh, whatever, it's just been said.
So I think the equivalent of that is, don't put anything in writing on social media or anything that you don't want read out in a court of law.
Yeah, fair.
Because if you don't want people to know about it, don't record it, don't write it, don't email it.
But you know what's so interesting about this? 40, 50 years ago when they were talking about it, it was writing on paper. But when we're now talking about it, it's writing on the internet.
Yeah.
I find that fascinating.
And isn't it interesting that your grandmother said the same thing?
Yeah, I think it was a lot of older people.
She's probably hanging out with my mum.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I'm a firm believer in that. Listen, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us on Ek Cup Chai. That was Saima Mir, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode. Remember to keep it locked to Independent Urdu on YouTube, X, Instagram, TikTok, where you can find out more about the British Pakistani diaspora. We'll be back next week. Peace.